You are listening to 106.7 Wilmington's Big Talker, and my name is Paul Vallone. I'd like to welcome you to Guns, Politics, and Freedom, where each Sunday at 5 p.m., as part of the Sunday Night Political Power Block, we give you the ammunition to better defend your gun rights. I'd also like to thank our sponsor, Hyatt Guns, America's largest gun shop. Check them out at hyattguns.com. In case you aren't familiar with me, I direct Grassroots North Carolina, or GRNC, since 1994, our state's most effective gun rights organization. As its director, I was involved in drafting and passing our original concealed handgun law. Since then, GRNC has gone on to engineer passage of concealed handgun reciprocity, our purchase permit bypass, Castle Doctrine and Stand Your Ground, the expansion of concealed carry into state and municipal parks, restaurants, public assemblies, educational properties, and much more. Grassroots North Carolina is exactly what the name implies, a grassroots collection of volunteers from all walks of life who share a common concern that our constitutionally guaranteed freedoms are being eroded. Check us out at grnc.org, that's grnc.org. As I prepared this show, not one but two mass killings have occurred in a single weekend, as violent sociopaths have continued to do what they seem to do best. 20 people were killed and 26 people were injured when a 21-year-old man from Allen, Texas, opened fire at an El Paso shopping center Saturday. Early Sunday morning, 9 people were killed and 26 injured after a shooter opened fire in a busy area in the Oregon district of Dayton, Ohio. The details of the two events are not yet clear, but we can be certain about one thing: that the left will exploit the tragedies to continue their effort to curtail your freedoms. In fact, yesterday afternoon, I got a text from Michael Bloomberg's AstroTurf organization calling itself Moms Demand Action. The message said, "Hi, Paul, it's Suzanne with Everytown/Moms Demand Action. Today, yet another community has been devastated by gun violence, this time in El Paso, Texas. As we mourn, we must also act. Volunteers in your area are organizing and fighting for gun reform. Are you ready to join them?" My return message, of course, was, "Boy, you guys don't waste much time exploiting tragedy, do you?" Now, I have no idea how they got my cell number or what led them to believe I might be a supporter. Big mistake. But I do know that Bloomberg's efforts are becoming more sophisticated, and that if we don't match them, we do so at our own peril. Never mind that on July 18th, a Japanese mass murderer killed 33 via arson, or that in France, in September, a terrorist in gun-hating France killed 86 with a truck. More on this as it develops. In today's show, we will delve into the latest trials and tribulations of the NRA and what it means to you as a gun rights supporter. We will discuss what you, as the owner of one of the popular AR-15 type pistols, need to do to avoid becoming an accidental felon. And we will discuss a rare case in which the left has it right. As the Washington Post recently pontificated, we are indeed in a cage match, a death struggle for America's mind. And in that cage match, the left understands something we do not. But first, this just in gun rights news. In case you are harboring the delusion that there is any limit to the leftist lust to suppress free speech and opinion, the national focus on a North Carolina gun shop will demonstrate otherwise. Cherokee Guns in Murphy, North Carolina, practically right in my own backyard, is in trouble with the left for buying a billboard about the squad. You probably know who I'm talking about. Representatives Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez of New York, Ilhan Omar of Minnesota, Ayanna Pressley of Massachusetts, and Rashida Tlaib of Michigan. And you probably know of the war of words between these anti-Semitic, anti-American leftists and President Donald Trump. Anyway, Cherokee Guns in Murphy bought a billboard which the left is denouncing as dangerous and violent and, of course, racist. Quote, Disgusting anti-government violent rhetoric from Cherokee Guns in North Carolina, said the Coalition to Stop Gun Violence in a Facebook post. Quote, threats against members of Congress, particularly minority members, are rising, and it is driven by the president's racial rhetoric. Then an entity identifying itself as, quote, Muslim advocates tweeted, quote, a billboard is up in North Carolina encouraging gun violence against the four. And of course, Representative Rashida Tlaib herself weighed in, tweeting, how the hell is this not inciting violence? And what was this violent, racist, and dangerous billboard supposedly inciting gun violence? It had pictures of the four together with verbiage saying, and I quote, the four horsemen cometh, with the word cometh crossed out and replaced with the word idiots. The billboard was signed The Deplorables. So now apparently the word idiot has become the latest racist code, and using it will brand you dangerous. In truth, of course, what makes you dangerous to the left is that you beg to disagree with their socialist agenda. Keep that in mind, the next time they push any kind of red flag legislation, such as being pushed right here in North Carolina by Representative Christy Clark of Mecklenburg County, which presumes to identify dangerous people. And remember it the next time gun control advocates start talking about who is fit to own guns, a group from which they have successfully barred even Social Security recipients who designate benefit payees. Tell this to your sportsman buddies who think that nobody needs those nasty old assault weapons because, after all, nobody wants to ban their Sporting Clays shotguns, do they? Because I can assure you that the dangerous people they will want to prevent from owning guns are people just like you. In other words, in other state news, the People's Republic of New York, from which I am an unfortunate refugee, recently announced it would increase the harassment of gun owners by increasing its waiting period from 3 days to 30 days, all in the name of better background checks, of course. Anti-Freedom Governor Andrew Cuomo signed the bill on Monday, and it takes effect in September. Quote, stronger background checks will help keep guns away from dangerous people, said Senator Michael Gianaris, a Democrat of Queens, a Senate sponsor of the bill. Now, to give you the flavor of what capitulation sounds like, consider the best argument that New York gun rights, I use that word in quotes, gun rights activists can summon against such infringements, that they are unnecessary, as though necessity is the metric for infringing on individual freedoms. Said Fox News, quote, Tom King, president of the New York State Rifle and Pistol Association, said the New York law isn't necessary. The 3-day waiting period worked well, he said, and lawmakers extended for reasons that are largely political. Oh, and on the topic of New York, a new law signed Wednesday by Cuomo also bars school districts across the state from authorizing anyone but those employed primarily as school resource officers, police, or security guards from carrying a firearm on school grounds. Meaning we can expect the next school massacre to occur in New York, the stated cure for which, of course, will be more gun control. And this just in from the Voice of Tolerance. You have undoubtedly heard that for wanting secure borders, you must be a racist and intolerant of the throngs overwhelming Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, at our southern border. Yes, you are intolerant according to the left, and quite probably a white supremacist. Well, the Voice of Tolerance was recently heard from when 69-year-old William Van Sprazen of Tacoma was fatally shot Saturday after throwing what authorities called incendiary devices at an immigration detention center in Washington state and trying to set a commercial-sized propane tank on fire. Court records show the man was arrested last year at a protest at the privately owned detention center, and Immigration and Customs Enforcement called the man anti-immigration enforcement protester, an anti-immigration enforcement protester. The ostensibly mainstream media has been silent on all this, of course. One wonders why they didn't blame the violence on the inflammatory rhetoric being spouted by Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who called ICE detention centers concentration camps. If those roles were reversed, you can be quite certain the media would blame you. Right now, we're going to take a short break. You are listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom on Wilmington's Big Talker 106.7, WilmingtonBigTalker.com. After our break, we will return with more information which could prevent you from becoming an accidental felon. My name is Paul Vallone, and you are listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom, today on Wilmington's Big Talker 106.7, WilmingtonBigTalker.com. Our show is sponsored by Hyatt Guns, America's largest gun shop. Check them out at HyattGuns.com. Let's talk about New Zealand, shall we? As you may recall, a few months ago, after 29 years without a mass killing involving any sort of military-style semi-automatic rifle, a terrorist targeted a mosque, murdering 51 people in Christchurch, New Zealand. The government immediately launched an extreme program to ban most centerfire semi-automatics, a law which passed unanimously and with little public opposition. According to the murderer's manifesto, his objectives included promoting gun control, particularly in the United States. Not only did Kiwi gun owners not particularly oppose the ban, their biggest objection, rendered far too late, was that the government wasn't paying them enough for the guns bought back. So here we have an interesting experiment involving a country without a constitutional right to keep and bear arms, and with an ostensibly compliant populace which readily bows to governmental intrusion. So how do you suppose that ban is working out for them? Well, according to American Military News, officials estimate there are as many as 1.5 million guns in New Zealand among 250,000 licensed gun owners. Of that number, Philip Alpers, a gun policy expert with Sydney University, estimates that approximately 500,000 are semi-automatic rifles and shotguns. The buybacks began on July 13th. So, how many guns do you suppose have been turned in so far? Go on, give it a guess. 700. Yes, in a compliant country with no right to bear arms, gun owners have thus far surrendered 700 of the estimated 500,000 semi-automatic firearms in the country. That could be a compliance rate as low as somewhere around 1 in 100. So, according to, and pardon me, I'll probably massacre this pronunciation, according to Victor Yokes of the Las Vegas Review-Journal, and I quote, "This non-compliance shouldn't come as a surprise." In 1996, Australia banned semi-automatic weapons following a mass shooting. Australians sold or handed over 700,000 weapons. That sounds like a lot. It's not, compared with how many weapons weren't turned in. Franz Cesar, a professor of the University of Vienna, Austria, estimated Australian gun owners illegally kept between 2 million and 5 million weapons. Nor did Australia's ban stop the flow of new firearms. And I quote, "An increasing number of groups are trafficking firearms," the Australian Criminal Intelligence Commission wrote in 2016. "The illicit firearms market is driven in part by outlaw motorcycle gangs, Middle Eastern organized crime groups, and other groups engaged in trafficking illicit commodities such as drugs." People break the law. Imagine that. Lawbreakers, that is, break the law. And of course, as in every other country enacting gun control, the only people left with the guns are the criminals. So the first lesson of New Zealand is that if a populace accustomed to being under the thumb of government refuses to surrender guns, can you imagine the rate of compliance here in the freedom-loving United States of America? The second lesson of the New Zealand ban is the value, if such can be said, of registering guns you plan to ban. Much to the lament of a new Kiwi gun control organization, Gun Control NZ, apparently they have not yet learned what U.S. gun banners have learned, namely that you need to better fool the populace by saying you are for gun safety rather than against guns or for gun control. But anyway, much to the lament of Gun Control NZ, the guns they plan to ban aren't registered, and their problem is that you can't confiscate what you can't find. According to a press release from the organization, quote, co-founder Nick Green says gun ownership imposes risks on all of us, and our current laws still have many loopholes. That much he has learned from the United States. Gun Control NZ wants effective gun laws that keep the entire community safe. Parliament recently banned most semi-automatic weapons, but until there is full control of these weapons and a register of all guns, the risk remains of them falling into the wrong hands. Gun Control NZ will give voice to the authority of New Zealanders who want to ensure the next generation inherits in a country free from the danger of gun violence, says co-founder and firearms researcher Hera Cook. But I'm sure it will all be fine, and this organization, I'm quite certain, will be satisfied once they've registered all the guns, right? Now let's turn our attention homeward to a topic near and dear to many of you, namely AR-15 and similar pistols. First, I direct your attention to episode 37 of this show, Guns, Politics, and Freedom, which was entitled AR-15 Pistols, Are You an Accidental Felon? And it featured attorney John Pierce and his explanation of what you may or may not legally do with an AR-15 pistol. You can find archived shows on my site at gunspoliticsandfreedom.com. Spell out the "and," by the way, gunspoliticsandfreedom.com. Now, I am a big fan of this particular system for a number of reasons. First, they are more compact than a standard rifle and can be carried discreetly. Second, they provide a better defensive tool given a world which is now riddled with terrorist acts and violent sociopaths who are living out active shooter scenarios. And finally, in North Carolina and many other states, you can legally conceal an AR-15 pistol using your concealed handgun permit. Now, the downside of such systems is that they very easily run afoul of the law and accidentally create a weapon regulated by the 1934 National Firearms Act, which the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives is very fond of prosecuting. Regulations which recently placed an Ohio man on the receiving end of felony prosecution for allegedly and illegally creating an unregistered short-barreled rifle. And in truth, the Ohio man is not unique, and may be one of thousands of gun owners who have become inadvertent felons simply for the minor addition of things like shoulder butt pads or vertical foregrips. Oh, and as an aside, I am not a lawyer, and nothing you are about to hear constitutes legal advice. Now, a few years ago, Sig Sauer and SB Tactical came up with a cool idea, which was billed as a means for allowing our returning wounded warriors to better operate AR-15 style pistols. It was the pistol stabilizing brace, which mounts onto the buffer tube of an AR-15 pistol or similar semi-automatic pistol, and is used by inserting the forearm through it, locking it to the forearm for better unsupported fire of what is otherwise a heavy handgun. But the stabilizing brace bore a remarkable resemblance to a shoulder stock, which quickly led people to start using it as such. This caused a potential problem because firearms with a shoulder stock and a barrel of less than 16 inches are considered under the National Firearms Act to be short-barreled rifles, subject to strict regulation including fingerprints, background check, $200 tax stamp for each transfer, and of course, registration by the BATFE. Initially, the BATFE approved use of the stabilizing brace from the shoulder. But later, and of course under the Obama administration, the BATF reversed itself, saying that if you shouldered a pistol stabilizing brace, you had redesigned the gun, making it a short-barreled rifle subject to regulation under the NFA. But under the Trump administration, the BATFE reversed itself yet again, this time allowing that simply shouldering a pistol stabilizing brace is not itself a violation of the NFA. However, you must not alter the pistol stabilizing brace, particularly in any way which would facilitate its use as a shoulder stock, since doing so would create an illegal short-barreled rifle. Now, I won't go into all the do's and don'ts of AR-15 type pistols, but I strongly suggest you check out episode 37 at gunspoliticsandfreedom.com. Now, what I'm going to do is, in a couple of minutes after we come back from our break, I would like to focus on a bit of dubious information circulating on the internet with respect to AR-15 type pistols and how, despite your best efforts, you might be an accidental felon. But first, we'll take a short break. You are listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom. After our break, we will return with more information better enabling you to defend your gun rights. My name is Paul Vallone. You are listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom today on Wilmington's Big Talker, 106.7 WilmingtonBigTalker.com. Our show is sponsored by Hyatt Guns, America's largest gun shop. Check them out at HyattGuns.com. Before our break, we were discussing the advantages and dangers of AR-15 type pistols in order to allow you to better comply with the law. I again encourage you to go to gunspoliticsandfreedom.com, spell out that and, gunspoliticsandfreedom.com, to find episode 37 of this show, which fully deals with the topic. Right now, we will discuss a letter recently sent by the ATF interpreting how to measure the length of such pistols. One of the things that Attorney John Pierce, when he was on my show in episode 37, one of the things he informed me was that if you add a vertical foregrip to any AR-15 pistol, which is under 26 inches in length, you have created a regulated NFA firearm, National Firearms Act, which the ATF calls an AOW or any other weapon, which can get you prosecuted as a felon. Oddly, hand stops, angled foregrips, such as that made by Magpul and others, or bipods, which may not be used as foregrips, do not violate the law. Only vertical foregrips. So, undoubtedly, thousands of gun owners are simply measuring their gun from muzzle to the end of the pistol stabilizing brace to determine whether it exceeds 26 inches. Right? Well, apparently many, if not most of them, may be accidental felons. In a June letter published in mid-July on AmmoLand.com, it seems the ATF clarified its position on this, and it ain't pretty. It seems that unlike rifles, for which the stock is an integral part and is necessary to fire the gun from the shoulder, a pistol stabilizing brace is not part of an AR-15 pistol since it is not an integral part of the gun, which is in theory not designed to be fired from the shoulder. So if the pistol stabilizing brace folds or telescopes, you may not extend it to measure the length of the pistol, and such extensions are not included in measuring a length of 26 inches or more in order to legally add a vertical foregrip. Moreover, if that isn't confusing enough, even a pistol stabilizing brace which does not fold or telescope could get you in trouble if you have added a receiver extension, aka an accessory which artificially increases the length of the gun, since such extensions also may not be used to come up with a length of greater than 26 inches. Now, decide for yourself, but my approach is not to invite prosecution. I don't add vertical foregrips to an AR-15 type pistol regardless of what length I think it might measure. Now, what has been circulating on the internet that is not true is that somehow this is an anti-gun action by the Trump administration. It appears that somebody at AmericanMilitaryNews.com read the AmmoLand piece or the original piece at Prince Law by Adam Kraut and began circulating the interpretation that the ATF had changed its classification of AR-15 pistols with vertical foregrips. The piece went on to say that such guns had to now be registered under the NFA. In truth, it is not entirely clear whether the interpretation has changed or whether the ATF was simply clarifying what has always been the case. Either way, beware, and when in doubt, simply remove the vertical foregrip. Now on to a topic which has been captivating the gun rights movement. Will the NRA survive? As you may recall, the NRA earlier this year filed suit against its long-term consulting firm, Ackerman McQueen, alleging overbilling by the firm. Later, the New Yorker magazine ran an expose detailing massive overbilling of the NRA by ACMAC over the span of decades, as well as featherbedding by NRA Executive Vice President Wayne LaPierre and others, including Wayne LaPierre's multi-million-dollar salary, which will reportedly continue even after he retires from his position. The debacle caused significant turmoil at the recent NRA annual meeting, including resignation of NRA President Oliver North. As they have in the past, the NRA's largely figurehead board of directors circled wagons and unanimously voted to support LaPierre and his cabal. Next, board members began to resign. First, it was Pete Brownell of the prominent Brownell's retailer. Then, Lieutenant Colonel Allen West asked Wayne LaPierre to step down. Meanwhile, the jackal pack of anti-gun attorneys general has begun to circle. In April, New York's Attorney General began an investigation into the NRA's tax-exempt status. Now the office of Washington, D.C. Attorney General Karl A. Racine has issued subpoenas for documents, including financial records from the NRA and its foundation as part of a probe into whether the organizations violated the city's Nonprofit Act. Elsewhere, the NRA Board of Directors is beginning to fracture. In mid-July, AmmoLand.com ran a letter from Sean Maloney, who's an NRA Board of Director member, to NRA President Carolyn Meadows, questioning the logic behind failing to reappoint him, Maloney, who is one of the NRA's top grassroots activists from, of all things, the NRA Grassroots Committee, after he reportedly began questioning the organization. Then a group of longtime NRA board members, both including Maloney, Timothy Knight, Esther Schneider, and Lieutenant Colonel Robert K. Brown, called for an independent investigation of allegations of rumored financial misconduct at the NRA. Colonel West later signed on to the letter. Now division among board members is increasing. According to the Washington Post, quote, 3 National Rifle Association board members have raised concerns about reports of reckless spending and mismanagement by the group's leadership, resigned Thursday, another sign of mounting dissent within the nation's most powerful gun rights group. The 3 board members, Esther Schneider of Texas, Sean Maloney of Ohio, and Timothy Knight of Tennessee, said they were stripped of their committee assignments after they asked questions about allegations of lavish spending by NRA Chief Executive Wayne LaPierre and other financial excesses. Quote, while our belief in the NRA's mission remains as strong today as ever, our confidence in the NRA's leadership has been shattered, they wrote in a letter to NRA officials Thursday, obtained by the Washington Post. Just a few days ago, The New Yorker piled on with yet another piece by Michael Spies, who comes, by the way, from Bloomberg's anti-gun propaganda organ, The Trace, which detailed a statement by NRA employee Emily Cummins, who resigned in November after distributing the statement questioning NRA financial practices to board members. The statement reportedly details a list of allegations regarding outside counsel William A. Brewer's legal work and his treatment of NRA staff as questions surfaced about the law firm's billings, which totaled, get this, $24 million in a 13-month period. Pretty good work if you can get it. And reports are now coming in of large donors withholding support for the NRA. MLand.com featured an article with a large donor named David Delaquila, in which the donor said he was suspending donations to the NRA and that he wasn't alone in doing what is essentially voting with his wallet. Now, for those in denial who said the NRA will never fail, think again. And for those who said we'd be better off without the NRA, they are equally delusional. As I've said for many years, for better or worse, the strength of the gun rights movement is measured by the strength of the NRA. If the organization fails, fence-sitting politicians will feel they have carte blanche to vote against your rights. So I strongly urge you to do two things. First, sign the petition at SaveTheNRA.com. I'm sorry, that's HelpSaveTheNRA.com. HelpSaveTheNRA.com, which has the stated goal of getting rid of Wayne LaPierre. Now, petitions are an imperfect means of political action, so I especially want you to do the next thing, which is to call the NRA at 877-NRA-2000. 877-NRA-2000, and deliver a loud and clear message that LaPierre must go. 877-NRA-2000. Call them. You've heard that occasionally even a blind soul finds a nut. And occasionally, albeit less frequently, a leftist gets it right. Last year, an article in Real Clear Politics described our present debacle as, quote, the Second American Civil War. Unfortunately, of course, the next part of that title was, and why liberals must win. We're going to take a short break, but after we return from the break, I want to discuss the Second American Civil War and what the left, your opposition in that Civil War, knows about how to win it that you don't. You are listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom on Wilmington's Big Talker, 106.7 WilmingtonBigTalker.com. We will return with still more information better enabling you to defend your gun rights. My name is Paul Vallone, and you are listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom today on Wilmington's Big Talker, 106.7 WilmingtonBigTalker.com. Our show is sponsored by Hyatt Guns, America's largest gun shop. Check them out at HyattGuns.com. Before our break, we were discussing a Real Clear Politics article written by the left describing our current political polarization as the Second American Civil War. Similarly, columnist David Van Drale, writing in the Washington Post, said, and I quote, "There are no civilians in the 21st century warfare because the hottest battlefield is the public mind. The front runs between your ears, between your neighbors, between mine. The enemy's objective, and the enemies are numerous, is to capture our thoughts and convictions. Belief is an immensely potent prize. A leader who is believed can reach the moon or massacre millions. Without belief and its distillate, trust, leaders are lost and nations are weakened." Now, admittedly, in this case, the blind squirrel immediately resumed sightlessly groping about the place, since the rest of the article centered only on the ability of anyone to propagandize using CGI-faked videos. So let's go back to the Real Clear Politics article, which runs under the title, It's the Second American Civil War and Liberals Must Win. Because I want you to see how thoroughly somebody from our opposition understands and is ready to manipulate the political realities we all too often refuse to admit. And I quote, "The differences between our two economic systems or two classes that are fundamentally at odds could conceivably get worked out through a political process that peacefully resolves differences. However, culture gets in the way. That's especially true when pressures are building for big system overhauls that create new winners and losers. Two different political cultures already at odds through different political ideologies, philosophies, and worldviews can get trapped in a polarizing process that increasingly undermines compromise. They see the world through different lenses, consume different media, and literally live in different places. They start to misunderstand the other side. They start to misrepresent them, and eventually make them the enemy. The opportunity for compromise is then lost. This is where America is today. At some point, one side or the other must win, and win big. The side resisting change, usually the one most rooted in the past systems and incumbent interests, must be thoroughly defeated, not just for a political cycle or two, but for a generation or two. That gives the winning party or movement the time and space needed to really build up the next system without always having fighting rearguard actions and getting drawn backwards. Well, now for what Paul Harvey calls the rest of the story. To the jokers who wrote this piece, California is, and I quote, the harbinger of America's political future. And indeed, harbinger is the perfect word, since one of its definitions is a forewarning, as in the harbinger of doom. The piece goes on to reject bipartisan cooperation and compromise. And on this, by the way, the authors and I once again agree. But then the authors proudly announce, quote, "In this period of American politics, at this juncture in our history, there's no way that a bipartisan path provides the way forward. The way forward is on the path California blazed about 15 years ago." Yep, to these warriors on the left, California is your future. You too can be taxed to death. You too can have your right to keep and bear arms rendered moot. You too can live in cities choked with homeless encampments and streets littered with hypodermic needles and human feces. And of course, you too can have the government micromanaging your every action and strangling your every freedom. But it gets better. The piece goes on to say, quote, "In the early 2000s, California faced a similar situation to the one America faces today. Its state politics were severely polarized and state government was largely paralyzed. The Republican Party was trapped in the brain-dead orthodoxies of an ideology stuck in the past. The party was controlled by zealous activists and corrupt special interests who refused to face up to the reality of the new century. It was a party that refused to work with Democrats in good faith or compromise in any way. The solution for the people of California was to reconfigure the political landscape and shift a supermajority of citizens, and by extension their elected officials, under the Democratic Party's big tent." Of course, reconfiguring the political landscape and shifting a supermajority of citizens means opening borders, as they are now doing with the rest of the country, and bringing in as many illegal aliens as possible to vote Democrat. Yes, sirree, the authors proudly announce, and I quote, "California today provides a model for America as a whole." I want you to remember this the next time California passes some wacky law or draconian gun control and you're tempted to say, "Yeah, that's just California. Glad I don't live there." But again, here is where the blind squirrel has once again found the nut, or perhaps in the case of California, a few million nuts. And I want you to hear the part they have exactly right. Two different cultures, already at odds, through different political ideologies, philosophies, and worldviews, get trapped in a polarizing process that increasingly undermines compromise. They see the world through different lenses, consume different media, and literally live in different places. They start to misunderstand the other side, then start to misrepresent them, and eventually make them the enemy. This is where America is today. And as they said, one side must win, and win big. As the Real Clear Politics article outlines in their plans, California is your future. California is the petri dish for socialist experiments they plan to foist on the rest of us. And it is safe to say that even the leftism of California is but a taste of the full Orwellian model they have in mind for you. This is why you, as a reasonable person, are ill prepared for the politics that will chart not only your future, but the future of your children and their children. You've been taught to be reasonable. You've been taught that politics is the art of compromise. You've been taught that if you just educate those with opposing viewpoints, they will eventually see it your way, since, after all, your way is the right way. Sadly, all of those lessons are false. First, being reasonable will only subject you to further exploitation, just as I pointed out in the first segment of today's show, when Moms Demand Action started sending text messages immediately after the El Paso tragedy. Second, you can offer no compromise to these people that will satisfy them. Whatever half the loaf you offer, rest assured they will be back for the rest of the loaf as soon as they can. This is a particularly important lesson to understand, since our side often engages in what I have come to call preemptive concession. For example, during the 2013 battle over federal universal background checks in Senate Bill 649, one element pushed the so-called Toomey Manchin Compromise as a means of staving off what they said could be worse. I was central to a coalition of 39 organizations dedicated to the principle that we would not compromise on gun control. And those 39 organizations hammered away at both legislators and the NRA, and the bill went down in flames. If in 2013 we had compromised on so-called universal background checks, I guarantee you that today, after these tragedies, the left, Moms Demand Action, would still be sending text messages looking for more. Do you think they'd say, well, we got universal background checks, so I guess there's nothing else to be done? Of course not. Whatever you give them, they will be back for more. So this brings us to the third and final lesson of the day. With the exception of winning over a few centrists that are the few that are left in our increasingly polarized environment, education will not win the day. It will not preserve American society. Confrontational politics is the order of the day, and in applying them, you must win. Nobody else can do it for you. You must vote, but of course that's not enough. You must join organizations like Grassroots North Carolina and Gun Owners of America. You must volunteer. You must organize, and you must win. This one is for all the marbles, folks. If you do not dominate the battle for American culture, the left will fundamentally transform American society into something I can assure you you will not recognize. My name is Paul Vallone. You've been listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom on Wilmington's Big Talker. See you next Sunday at 5.